it over from Central Region Headquarters, who is going to give us some updates on the hiring process. So Anna, whenever you're ready, go ahead and take it away.
Good morning. First, I want to say the challenge with giving a training like this is there's still the bugs and kinks that are being worked out by the enforcement of the hiring plan. So as the Weather Service is working through it, some of the parts of the hiring plan are being strictly adhered to, and some of them are still being implemented. And so we'll go through this, or as we go through this, you'll hopefully understand more. I don't have answers to all the questions, but I will continue to get answers to any of the questions that we need. Let's see. Okay. So Trump has 7 goals for the merit hiring plan, but the key goals for it, as it applies to an applicant, are the 4 that are listed here. And again, you can read all of the pages or all of the parts of the plan. And these are the 4 that we're going to go over a little bit more in depth. Okay, so the recruitment of individuals, and it really wants to focus on that candidates should be committed to improving the efficiency of the federal government. They're trying to get away from their perception that federal employees just sit around and drink coffee and get paid, a significant salary. So that's some of where this is going to be coming from, is that they want to improve our perception by the civilian population and how it relates to the federal government. So these are the things, the hiring process, the competitive service, the technical or alternative assessment, and we'll go into more of that. And that will replace the self-assessments, the typical questions that you're used to seeing, and the 4 free flow 8 questions that everybody will get to answer. So in regards to the 4 narrative questions, USA Staffing, this is directly from our ET announcements. And I just want to point out the difference. This is one of the major differences between the policy that says it is required and how the Weather Service is currently announcing the job. It says that you are not required to answer the 4 questions, but it's highly encouraged. I would recommend personally answering the 4 questions just to get some sort of experience into how to answer them and what fits into 200 words. Okay, so these are the 4 free flow essays. These are directly out of the memorandum, and they are in the job announcements, exactly like this. You are limited to 200 words, and that's not as much as you would think it is. I did several tests on coming up with questions and answers for it, and it's roughly 1,000 spaces. A good paragraph is basically what it works out to. One of the biggest things is with all this AI is you are not allowed to use AI to answer the questions. However, when I was testing it to see what it would come out with, Gemini, it didn't want to play along. I put in, this is the first question, and it came back with this answer. And ChatGPT came back with a much more robust answer. And I copied it out, and it's 238 words that they came up with. And of course, you could do limiting it. But if you see down here, it says, tell me more about your background. And so I did. I kind of put in some of the questions or some of the answers that about my job that I do. And it came up with a 250-word response. However, if you spend about 30 minutes with me, you'll see that this is not how I speak or how I present my thoughts. this this isn't this isn't typically how I would answer questions. So it would be very obvious that that what I put into the recruitment is not there. And so when you're using the Chat GPT or Grok or Gemini, and you want to maybe format how your questions could be answered by putting in your experience, I think that might be beneficial. You could use it to focus your thoughts, but you are not to just copy and paste what ChatGPT gives you as an answer. This is particularly important for other jobs. If you apply outside of the Weather Service and how they might be enforcing the 4 questions, because they might say it's required to answer those 4 questions. I'm going to see if this will work. So perhaps you apply for Department of the Army or Department of the Navy, and it's required that you answer it. Now, and you don't know what they're going to do. Are they going to copy and paste your resume into ChatGPT themselves to see if it's, what it would answer? So you want to make sure that you steer clear of AI as far as answering the question for you, and that you go ahead and gather your thoughts and then answer these. It's not timed when you're doing your job applications, so you have time to answer it. You don't have 30 seconds to come up with a response or anything like that. But you want to have an idea before you go into the job application. Okay, so. And then moving on to the assessment. So this is one of the other things that is new. There are practice assessments out there. And this is a hyperlink, Jenny. I didn't realize they couldn't see that. Maybe you could post that for them. So the practice assessments, when I got in and took them, they were kind of like SAT type questions. Which one is the better answer? And it was not the easiest thing to go through. So it's good to get in and take these practice assessments to see how they're going to be utilized for different positions that you might apply to. You will not find out if you answered a question correctly. When you apply for the job, you will not find out if you answered the question correctly. You won't get a score at the end of it. And the possible concern with that is that the score will actually follow you for a year. So once you answer it for the 856, if it's the same assessment for every 856 that you apply to, because there's different portions in the assessments that can be selected for the job announcement, but if it's the same one, that same score is going to follow you for a year, and then you can retake the test when you apply for a job after a year. And the practice assessments, you can take them as many times as you like. Resumes. This to me is the biggest change in how we apply for jobs. And it's a big concern when scientists, when you all have these really long words for anything that you might be doing. The resume is limited to 2 pages. You can put in 5 pages, but only the first 2 pages will be forwarded as to the selecting official. So I've been in the federal employment for a long time, and I got in and started putting in my jobs, and I only put in 3 of my jobs, the last 3 jobs that I've had. The problem with USA Jobs Build a Resume does not yet limit your resume to 2 pages. And so I found that to be a bit of a concern, that you don't know how long your resume is when it's being built in the system. So I would recommend doing it on a Word document, and then go ahead and upload it so that you know exactly how much is 2 pages. The other parts of the job, such as, if it's part-time or full-time, 40 hours, 20 hours, that all still has to be listed, as well as whether or not the grade and series for the positions, all of that stuff remains the same, but we have to figure out how to make it 2 pages. And so what you want to make sure you're doing is that you write your resume for each job. You're going to review each announcement, because the DE, which is the delegated examining, which is open to the public, or the ST is status candidates, and that's open to people with the status. You can apply for both positions, and if you do that, you want to make sure that you're looking to ensure that there's no difference in the requirements, such as a status candidate may have a specific time and grade in a certain series, but the DE might only require a degree, things like that. And you want to review the qualifications, education, conditions of employment, and how you will be evaluated. Okay, so on the 2-page requirement, just wanted to kind of go over a couple of things that I found that I thought were really good. And you want to focus on the grade that qualifies you for the position you're applying for. So as I tell Central Region, when you're applying for an LMET position that's a GS-13, you want to ensure that your experience that you're highlighting and putting in your resume is at the GS-12 level. If you did something great and wonderful as a GS-5, that's amazing, but it's not going to qualify you for HR standards for the GS-13 level. So you really need to include everything that you did as a grade below or the grade of. I mean, if you're applying for GS-13 WCM, you can use GS-13 LMET experience. That still qualifies you because it's at or below, it's 1 grade below or the equivalent grade to the position you're applying for. You want to summarize the experience, and you really want to focus on results driven, especially when we are limited to 2 pages. I predicted a tornado 10 hours in advance that ended up destroying 500 acres. I mean, whatever the case may be, use quantifiers to show that it was important, but you need to make sure that it's answering the requirements section for what they're looking for in the job announcement. Make sure you don't include anything that doesn't add clear value. Again, focus on the requirements and qualifications that are listed in the job announcement. The possible issue with that is ensuring that the language that you're using is understood by HR. So when you guys are talking about your meteorology stuff and you're trying to say you projected weather reports, obviously I'm not a meteorologist, but when you're trying to explain to them that you met the requirement, short, succinct, and how you did that. I predicted the weather by using radars and scopes. I don't know what you guys do, but you want to make sure it's very clear that the requirement is you predicted weather and you did that by doing XYZ. Ensure you have your month and year and your hours. And historically, we have always listed the job and then the address, the full-time, part-time, and it's been stacked. Since we're at 2 pages, try out the vertical and see how that looks. Because if you put it in 6 font, that's not going to win you very many hiring official likes. So make sure that it's a readable font, but try and play around with how you do it. I've seen a lot of resumes that come through where it's very pretty. On the left side, it lists the job experience, and then on the right side, it has all the information. But that tends to make a page or a resume about 10 pages long. So try mixing it up a little bit and getting it on there. And again, just highlighting that the skills and experiences have to be reflected in your resume that qualifies you for the job. The other thing is the time to hire. And you can go and read all about the time to hire in the executive order and in the LPM memo. What it really breaks down to is that what they're trying to do is that a job offer made roughly on the 15th of September, you should be on board before the end of the year. And this is important that you kind of take into account that when you're applying for a job, 3 to 4 months later, you should be at that new job. So make sure that you're applying at a time when it's good for you to make that move, rather than applying for the job, getting the job, and then deciding that you can't move. So hopefully this will cut down on the timelines and getting everybody done. The security requirements are going to, when they do your background clearance checks, they're supposed to reduce the time that it takes to clear you. We don't have too many top secrets, so it's typically about 21 days that is going to be required for most of our positions for security to get clearance done. Okay, so one of the questions was, do they still get a cover sheet with the resume? And according to the announcements and everything, yes, you should still have your resume and the cover letter sent. However, if you get contacted for an interview, because you can't put in, you may not have enough room for all your awards or publications or anything like that, you may want to send the cover sheet, copy of your resume again, and anything that you think the hiring panel might need to know before they interview you. The next one is that HR will be communicating with you via email. And you need to keep that email. Yes, it says you can change it, but it causes a lot of problems if you change your email. So make sure it's one that you want to use until you're on board physically at the next duty station. Again, do not use AI or ChatGPT, like ChatGPT or Gemini for the essay questions. And this was a website I found that is written by the website is held by somebody who's actually a certified resume writer. And it really helped explain the 4 questions that are required, how to write your resume, and what to include. So it's not a government website. I am not saying it is 100% accurate. I do not control it, but I found it to be a good resource to take a look at. Okay. And questions. And I think there was some. Okay. So for the practice questions, and I am going to, one of the things I can do is I can show you guys in an actual job announcement what it links to and what it looks like. Okay, so when you pull up, there it is. Okay, so you can get into our electronics technician. And you can go through, and these are the duties that you're going to be performing and the conditions that you're going to have to be working in. And then these were the requirements that you have to fit or meet and the qualifications. Okay, so specialized experience. This is kind of key because you want to really pay attention to any ands or ors that are in it, and make sure that you meet either and or. This one doesn't necessarily have it, and but you can see you're installing, operating, and maintaining a wide range of electronic, etc. So in your resume, you want to make sure it says, I installed, operated, and maintained electronic, etc. You want to make sure that's in your resume. Okay. And then if you keep scrolling down, how you will be evaluated is right here. And there's always a link in the job announcements that will pull up the questionnaire so that you can see the questions that are going to be asked. So when you're practicing using a different, you're using the practice assessments that have been developed in the USA Job Support. These are the questions that are asked when you're doing the job application. And once you answer these questions, that's when your 1 year clock starts. And you can scroll down and look through all of it. And the big difference comes once you scroll down, and I know this is probably making people busy, I'm sorry. So then it starts the assessment one there. And this one has specific information about how to do things. Hang on just a second. That's actually the old one. So you can see the old one. Select the one statement that best describes the experience. I had this backwards, I'm sorry. This is the new one. Okay, and the assessment is here. And then assessment 2, you can see the questions that are going to be asked. So I don't know what the best first step is, but these are the questions that you'll be asked to apply for the job.
Who writes these?
The agencies do, and so it could be different. So, well, there's 2 parts. The agencies write them, as well as USA Jobs has a canned assessments, which when you take practice assessments under the USA Jobs link that Jenny posted, those are like the canned assessments that say, as a hiring official, I want to use whatever they pre-planned for this series. So it could be anything. When you look at like 1301s that are more general, it could be any kind of 1301 series. So it's up to the agency to ensure that they're utilizing the right questions. Okay. Okay, so Ashley, I believe you're asking your question as you have a detail for a position like you were lead net when you were a GS-12. That would be important to include as well. And I've seen it, typically people will put a separate section in there indicating that they were detailed to the GS-13 lead met position. And so they would then put in there the experience that they did at that. It doesn't give you the 1 year time and grade that's required for HR standards, but it does prove that you have experience for the hiring official. Kalita, are you talking about their education requirements? On the resume? Okay, so when a new hired, a newly graduated applicant applies, they have to include their resumes or their transcripts with their resume. So then their transcripts are reviewed in order to ensure that they meet the requirements and they have the requirements per OPM for the 1340 series. Michelle, no, the cover letter does not count as part of the resume if you upload it in a different section. If you upload it and the resume as part of a one page or as part of one document, then yes, it would count. But if you upload it as supporting documents, I believe is what it is, then it would not count. Thank you, Maxwell. Chelsea, yes, those assessment 2 questions, the questions will be kept. Those are the ones that are kept for the year. And if an agency is using the canned responses, it depends on what section they're using, if they're going to utilize the same section. So if you apply to a 1301 position for the weather service and they're using one set of because there's different parts of the assessments, then they can go ahead and use the same ones, or they might use a different one. Maxwell?
Hey, just to piggyback off of Anna, just to clarify for the field, when you go into USA Jobs and you apply for the job, that is the questionnaire. You're going to answer those questions. Once you're done submitting your application, you're going to get a follow-on email to answer the assessment based on the position that you're applying for. They're broken out into different categories. That assessment is the one that Anna is talking about that will be kept on file for a year. And if the year passes and you apply for another job, you'll get a separate email once again to go ahead and do another assessment. And to follow on that, Anna, myself, and no one else within AMD has the ability to see a pass, fail, whatever your score is. It's based on whatever the criteria OPM and USA Jobs has designated for that assessment. We do apologize, but we're not privy to that information. Over.
Thank you. Maxwell, while I'm reading some of these questions, did you want to contribute anything else?
I think I've answered everything. Oh, okay. To answer your question about when the clock starts for the assessments clock starts the minute you hit submit on that assessment. So once it's received by OPM, that's when that year timeline starts. I will tell you, and I've taken a couple of these assessments already, based on the series that you're applying for, some of these assessments will last up to 3 hours. Some of them are critical thinking in nature. Others will have questions regarding calculations, statistical analysis. In the HR world, they'll have policy, CFR questions, things like that. They're gauging your level of expertise within the given field that you're applying for. These are not questions designed, as they call it, to stump the dummy. These are actually value-added questions to see whether or not you are actually knowledgeable in your field. So good, bad, or indifferent, this is what they're using, and this is how they're gonna keep track to do their rack and stack at that level. Over. No, they will not tell you if you have failed. We apologize for that. So, Jeremy, to answer your question, a letter of recommendation is still recommended. When you look at your application, documents regarding the series, there are many things that are required, and then there's additional things that are on there. You'll notice that on some of them it says other. If you have a letter of recommendation, you're more than welcome to attach that. Sorry about the ums. So when you're doing this, there's no requirement, and I'll tell you right off the front, there's no OPM requirement for cover sheets, letters of recommendation, or any of those things that are not part of the initial package. That is not to say don't do it. If it's going to better your chances to identify your skills, then I highly recommend it. In order for you to actually make sure that the right person gets those documents, make sure you're looking at the lines within your submissions to USA Jobs. You've got transcripts, you've got SF-15s, SF-50s. If there is a other and you have that document ready, then attach it. Once you get that email from the site supervisor or the hiring official, as Anna has already mentioned, that's the time that it's recommended that you submit your cover sheet if you didn't do a recommendation letter, or do the cover sheet as other in USA Jobs. That's also an option. But if you want to make sure that site supervisor sees it, then go ahead and do it when you get that email invite. Over. Yes, the assessments are timed. Some of them it'll tell you in advance. This may take up to 45 minutes, up to 3 hours. And I've already taken one that's given me a 3-hour limit. I haven't busted the time, so I don't know what happens when you get close to busting the time. Kathleen, no, as far as I know, unless Anna can correct me on this, your question about the cover letter and a resume, that hasn't changed. Now, please be aware that the HR side of the house, OHCS, they're in the middle of their own reorganization regarding YRCI and how they do business. So if something changes from today on, Anna's most likely going to be able to tell you that faster than I will because she's got the connections. But as of right now, none of that has changed. Okay, Anna, regarding the probationary stuff, Anna's going to have to answer that question because I don't have any additional information on that side of the house. And Brian, regarding the cover letter, it does get reviewed by HR. Now, the level of importance on that side of the house, I can't answer to. I'm not privy to their criteria. It may or may not be passed on to the hiring official. Over. I'll give Anna the opportunity to answer Schneider's question. Over.
I'm not really certain I understand Anna's question. Okay, so no, okay. If you're a current federal employee and you just take a promotion, that doesn't start a new probationary period. And the probationary period for a new employee, like a new off the streets employee, versus a supervisory probationary period, those are two separate things. The new probationary period, it comes into play depending on how you're hired and if you're switching agencies. So if you're hired on a DE certificate as a public employee going over to the Department of the Army, then they have the ability to put in the probationary period. They could possibly waive it if they wish, but they could also institute it. You want to make sure you're reading the job announcement to see if there's a possibility for a probationary period. But if you are staying within the agency, you're doing the same line of work, you've been here for a year or more, new probationary period is not to be put on your hiring. It's not to be put as a condition of hiring. You want to make sure you review your TJO and your FJO to ensure that they're not there. And if they are there, to certainly question it and ask why. So I think that answers Anna's question. The cover letter, Brian, in addition to everything Maxwell said, they are not to review. It's your resume that HR looks at to qualify you for the position. The cover letter is more in depth to the hiring manager who might understand what you're saying about meso analysts and tornadoes and everything, but HR is going to be reviewing what you have in your resume, and then they're going to look at your SF50 that you attach to ensure you meet any time and grade requirements. They will also look at transcripts. If you're changing series, you're going from a 1301 back to a 1340, include your transcripts, because they will do a re-review of your transcripts to ensure that you meet 1340 requirements.
Hey, Anna.
Yes.
Let's go to Gerald, who has his hand up. And then also, would you be willing to share your slides just in case people missed some of the information so they can kind of review it back while they're asking questions?
Yes.
All right, Gerald, go ahead.
Yeah, my question was the following. When we look at the ET job announcement, we see that there is an assessment 1 and an assessment 2. So assessment 2 looks like it's the new one. Assessment 1 looks like the type of questions that we used to get before. So that assessment 2 in there, when Maxwell, you were saying that, you know, there's like a 2 to 3 hour assessment time. That assessment 2 doesn't take 2 to 3 hours. Are you saying that there is another assessment in addition to assessment 2 that is listed there for the ET job? Because assessment 1 is the previous assessment that it was a self-assessment, and assessment 2 is the new one to comply with executive orders based in the way that I see it there. So if there are more assessments in there, you know, if they are not indicated in there in the previous section, so it would be nice to know that.
Maxwell, are you still there? I understood the assessment 2 to be the additional assessment as well. And I don't know, that may depend upon the position that you're applying for.
Right.
But Maxwell has also, from what I understood, received additional assessments for the jobs that he's applying for. And that might be the specific type of job he's applying for.
Okay. That's how I interpret it when he was saying that what we're seeing here for the ET job is what they're going to ask for the ET job, you know, in that new assessment. Now, the second question that I have, it has to do with the resume. You mentioned in one of the slides, Anna, that we have to cut out all jobs, you know, jobs that are not relevant, obviously, to add more space and to have more space for what requires people to qualify. However, we have always been told when we created resumes in USA Jobs that we need to include every job that we have worked for that is relevant. So let's say a person has worked 8 jobs that are relevant to meteorology. Can the person now just say, I only want to include the last 3? If we don't include the other 5, that's going to show like gaps in your work, and which is usually not a good thing, because then you show inconsistencies in how the timeline that you have worked. So is it required that we still have to include every job, even if we only include 1 line for each one of them? Are those jobs, older jobs, also required that we include the 40 hours, that we include the grade, that we include everything, or just a 1-liner for each job is sufficient? See, that's not clear to me.
I don't know that there's a good answer yet. So from my personal experience, I was military and then a military spouse. And moving, I have several jobs. So even if I did a 1-liner, I'm going to be running close to a full page of previous jobs. There is one of the suggestions I saw when I was doing some research for this is to put the entire time that you were employed. So if it's with the Weather Service, that makes it really easy. You could just put National Weather Service from 1990 to 2022 when you got a promotion. Or you could put Department of Defense or Department of the Army if you worked for them, and just put a big gap, and you could list some of the job titles are in there. I mean, this merit hiring plan has obviously been written for the civilian workforce and what the civilian workforce utilizes. They can't require us, if they're going to limit us to 2 pages, they can't require us to necessarily list every single job. But what I found was beneficial was to put, Department of Defense, and then list my entire time and put some of the job experiences, ensure that you put 40 hours in the senior ranking jobs at the top, so if you're GS 1211, put those at the top. But you can't, depending on how many jobs you have, it's going to be significantly difficult to include the positions that you've had, as well as making sure that you meet the requirements and the specialized experiences in the job announcement for the position, and then your education requirements and everything as well. So with the 2-page resume, you're really going to have to play with how it looks for the job. So, and that kind of plays into, say you have been the division chief and not doing forecasting for a while. You can put a small paragraph, very, very short, 3-4 lines in there about being a division chief, and then highlight this, just a suggestion. But you could highlight, the GS 13 level work you did as a forecaster to really answer the questions that are required, the specialized experience and everything. It's going to be a challenge. Like I said, mine, not cutting anything out from just my past 3 jobs, was 4 pages long. And I don't have all the big words that meteorologists have, and the different programs that you all use. So the most important things are the experience that qualifies you, if it's GS 12 for a GS 13 position, meeting the specialized experience and the requirements that are in the job announcement. And then more than likely, you're going to have to do a big block for everything else and just put in there what has been done. But it really is dependent upon what experience the person brings to the resume. Because you don't want to forget your education. You don't want to forget the jobs that you've done. So, and you don't want to make it 6-point font. So you're going to have to play with your resumes to see how to best reflect the information that you have to meet the job requirements and get your time in there.
Yeah, one thing in that ET job announcement, and I'm focusing on that ET job announcement because we have one announcement for ETs in our office in Phoenix, and I want to understand all the details about it. It says in there that under the resume section, if you look under the resume section, it says that 40 hours is not required for full-time jobs. So is that a new change that now 40 hours are not, to include 40 hours is not required? See, and then when you go to when you click on the link on USA Jobs, it says that you have to include 40 hours if it is, then that you have to include the number of hours for every job, even if it is full-time or part-time. But in the resume, right there in that section of the ET requirements for the resume, it says that you don't need to include 40. If a job is full-time, you don't need to include the number of hours. That's what I'm trying to do. So that's kind of confusing. Somebody may see that and may say, oh, I don't have to include it if it is full-time. So I just want to, if that's a mistake, or Maxwell?
Hey, Gerald, just so everybody understands, the 40-hour identification request or requirement, that's a YRCI thing. That was put in there to give those evaluators an easier way of determining just how many hours the individual is working in that particular field, right? Here's the official answer. USA Jobs is based on OPM requirements. What USA Jobs asked for is what you need to provide. That is the best way to ensure your chances of getting on the list, right? That's the official answer. Now, let me add on to that. National Weather Service has other individuals involved in that evaluation process, such as OHCS, HRBA, YRCI. Now, these are all acronyms, if you're not familiar with them, that are in the HR side of the world, right? If they have an additional requirement, Anna, Nikki, Stephanie, myself, we hopefully would be made aware of those requirements, and then we would pass that on to the field. If something comes down that you are not made aware of it, but yet you were disqualified because of that requirement, then what we do as your advocates is we go back to those individuals and say, hey, you can't really nick this person for not having X, Y, and Z because USA Jobs says this. Where does it say in your documentation that you have to have this, right? So long story short, any additional requirements that come out of YRCI, OHCS, or HRBA hopefully will be passed on to us through them. And then Anna and the staff and myself will let you guys be made aware of it as soon as we are made aware of it. But the safe bet is whatever USA Jobs is asking for is what you will provide. We are here to help you. If you're not sure, hey, does this sentence make sense? Like I've told you in the past, I am more than happy to read a resume, let you know what USA Jobs feels for it, and give you my personal, professional, explanation on it. There's others out there, other MICs, HICs, go to your cohorts, have them look at these resumes, that kind of thing, and make sure before you submit, does this answer the question? Is this going to give USA Jobs what they need in order to properly evaluate me? Does that help?
Kind of. It's just an ongoing process that I guess we'll have to see. I'm just concerned that somebody may read that in that particular ET announcement and not include the 40 hours. And then we'll have to, like you said, help that person or based on the inconsistency, because there is an inconsistency there in the announcement.
Yeah, and like I said, we advocate for you. It's our job here on this side of the house that if you run into those issues, we have to go to those people who are evaluating and say, look, you can't do that. That's what we're here for. We're trying to get rid of those inconsistencies, and I'm hoping that with these adjustments that are being made at that level, that they finally have gone, they're on the same page as OPM and USA Jobs. So,
okay.
Over.
Thank you.
So Anna, I'm just going to collect all of these questions so that we can do our best to find the answers to some of them. I think a lot of the questions are about the assessments. So I think if we can get some clarity on all those and just post it for everyone afterwards, that would be great. Just some of the lingering questions are about, especially like for changing job series, if you had someone that was in the 1340 series and wanted to switch over to the 2210, for example, if you have some advice about just how to make sure that that person really looks qualified on their resume, I think maybe some clarity on that would help.
So one of the big things, and this, I see Lexi's question in there as well about copying and pasting. You don't want to copy exactly what it says. You want to, if it says planning and conducting testing of field equipment, it's more of, I planned the testing of field XYZ, and then we conducted biweekly the testing of XYZ in the field. So you want to take what they're requiring and answer how you have done it. For the 2210 changing any series, you want to look at how you did it. And if you took classes that, IT classes and got your degree, and then you were trained in the class or at work to assist and utilize AWIPS. You installed all of Greg Noonan's AWIPS programs on your computers, or whatever the case may be. You want to ensure you include that to highlight that, yes, I can do this job. Here's the proof. Here's what I've done. And you want to make sure, obviously, that you did it so that, you know, it's when they call and do a reference check, they can say yes. But you have to take what the job is asking for and then highlight where you have done that or how you have done that. I hope that makes a bit of sense. And then Jenny, I know I thought this was only going to be like 15 minutes. And since I speed read through the slides as fast as possible to do that, I'll pass it back to you because we are getting kind of close to the timeline. I've copied the chat and I'll clean it up so that we can go ahead and get the answers. One of the things is we really don't have very good answers for some of these questions because OHCS is still trying to figure out how to implement it for some of these. And so it's going to be a living document. Marcus, thank you. You put in there the link to the Google site that I have. I want to say that's a living document. So if you come across something that might be questionable, to let me know because it might just be outdated and it's further down the page and I didn't catch it or something like that. But as I get more information, like the top of the page is Ken's reference to the merit hiring plan and the new process. So I do try and get that updated as we learn more information about how everything's going to go. And Jenny, I will hand it back to you.
All right, Anna, thank you so much for providing this information. I know there are a lot of unanswered questions. We are going to make sure that we seek answers to those and make sure that you have access to all of them. I know we have folks from all different regions on here, so I will work with your regional ROCs to make sure that you have access to the slides, the recording, and then any Q&A that we are able to answer. And this, like Anna said, is a work in progress. So stick with us and hopefully we will continue to have better answers for you. So that concludes our Innovation Spotlight for today. Really appreciate all of you attending, interacting. This is probably the biggest crowd that we've had in a long time on one of these calls. So appreciate your attention and please join us next time. We'll see you all later. Thanks so much.